technical, mathematical. But anyhow, yeah, I think we've been through the most formulas for today. And now we're going a little bit into law of one price and try to also link efficiency considerations into our technical analysis so far. So let's take a look at it. And hopefully you'll understand also this part intuitively. But I think it's an interesting and very, very important thing to consider and analyze here. So first of all, what is the law of one price? The definition of it is, well, if equivalent investment opportunities trade simultaneously in different competitive markets, then they must trade for the same price in both markets, meaning basically same products or same cash flow related investment opportunities, same price. This is like an efficiency consideration, right? That's also how many parts of economic subjects are described, and also what you're going to see in the course of your studies all over again. In microeconomic topics, you will also assume, okay, if markets are efficient, then there will be no social costs, and equilibria are as they should be, and the like. But then reality might get in, and we are not any longer in this law of one price or efficient market scenario. However, as a starting point, looking at markets and efficient markets might be helpful, and maybe also in some markets, after they had like inefficient phases, they might become efficient again. So it's valuable to also consider this in context of economics, and in our case, in context of financial analysis. As you might know from introductory economics courses, well, prices respond to supply and demand. If more people want to buy something, the price will rise. If more people want to sell something, the price will go down. Arbitrage represents the opportunity to make a profit without taking any risk. So, well, and this is like something where efficient markets would argue this should not happen. So as they say, well, if there is, what I told yesterday multiple times, there's no such thing as free lunch. So if someone basically tells you, well, you may get something for free without paying for it, you should get, in normal cases, like skeptical. Someone is offering me, without any risk to make an incredibly high return. Not likely to happen, right? And according to this law of one price, given if you say, well, normally, if I want to make a very big return for my investment, then this is associated with risks. And therefore, if this is what we normally observe, and then someone tells me, well, for the same promised return, you do not have to bear any risks, then I say, well, that sounds a little cheesy, right? In case of those law of one price considerations, where you would argue, well, this is kind of an investment into a risk, into what normally would be perceived into something, well, that no one knows how it develops. However, someone promises me that, okay, here, become a millionaire in a month. I'm going to show you we have found the right system to do so. All those advertisements, at least in Europe and Germany, you frequently get, where someone is promoting you to or promising you the stars from the sky without having to pay anything. He's offering it for you for free, and he made good, or she made great experiences. The law of one price basically tells you, well, if that's not what we usually see, then we should at least get skeptical, right? Which doesn't mean that in reality there might be scenarios or cases in which, well, you might really have found something interesting, and not a loophole, but kind of something which is out of the ordinary. You might have a great idea whatsoever. All fair, but on a systematic basis, if someone is promising you, here, I found the greatest system, no one has it, whatever, and everyone can do it, that should raise some concerns. Again, like a little bit beyond OFIN or introductory financial considerations, but this is what is behind this law of one price. consideration. Another, and now more cash flow related implication of this law of one price is the following. If this law of one price holds, meaning same investment opportunities should have the same price, right? This has also implications for like scaled investment opportunities, meaning something like in a very stylized way. If you have one investment project which has a particular size and it's priced at price X, and you have another identical investment project, apart from the fact that it's twice as big as the first investment project, right? Then you could say, well, looks as if it's related to the same underlying idea. However, the one investment project is twice as large as the other investment projects, but identical apart from that. Then according to the law of one price, you would argue, okay, well, if it's the same investment project, but they just differ in size, then they should have, well, a different price, but only in amount of the difference of the size of the investment project. Meaning same investment, double size would mean double the price because double the investment, right? That's one of the implications of this law of one price. The same holds true with adding or subtracting cash flows. We will see this in a practical or in the overviews on the next slide a little more in detail, but it also refers to, well, delaying or accelerating cash flows, right? I mean, suppose you have one investment opportunity you could conduct today versus the same investment opportunity conducting tomorrow. Then according to the law of one price, well, what have we learned today? I mean, like getting 10 versus getting 10 tomorrow. Like in the very beginning of our today's lectures, we said, well, okay, we need to take into account interest rates, right? So how much is the 10, which numerically is the same amount? Well, 10 today, 10 tomorrow, numerically it looks the same. However, this one period difference needs to be accounted for. And how did we do it? Well, by discounting, by pricing in that time, that there is a time value of money. And the same holds true when we consider this law of one price, when we consider a whole set of investment opportunities. So again, we have one investment opportunity today and the same investment opportunity with the same cash flows one period later. Well, according to the law of one price, they should have the same price, but the time value of the investment opportunity tomorrow needs to be discounted in the present value in order to be comparable, right? So everything we learned today is also reflected in this law of one price considerations, and we will see this in some examples today. And I think this gives you a nice or closes this circle of argumentations and calculations we've conducted today from the perspective of investment projects in context of this law of one price consideration. So the first implication of law of one price was relating to scaling cash flows, right? So suppose here, to make this concrete, we have one investment opportunity whatsoever, which would give you 350 in period 1, 250 in period 2, and 100 in period 3. You have a second investment opportunity, which gives you 700 in period 1, 500 in period 2, and 200 in period 3. When you compare these two cash flows with each other, what can you see? That's purely descriptive. If you compare this cash flow, these cash flows, and these cash flows, what can you see? 350 versus 700.
The second double than the first one, right?
Sorry, I didn't understand this. Sorry, that was my bad. The second one is larger.
Yeah, it's
doubles.
double.
Yeah, exactly. So you see the cash flows of the first one are half as big as the cash flows of the second one. So basically what you see here is the cash flow of the second example in each of the times are exactly twice as big as in the first one. When we have a 10% discount rate, you can follow up and recheck this on yourself. the present value of this stream of cash flows would be 350 divided by 1.1 plus 250 divided by 1.1 to the power of 2 plus 100 divided by 1.1 to the power of 3, which would give you a present value of 599.92. Knowing the law of one price, meaning same products or same investment opportunities should have same price, which also includes what I told you. Well, if you have an investment opportunity which is scaled by a certain factor, here by the factor of 2, should give you the same price, just scaled up or down by the corresponding factor. What can you tell me without calc or without having to do the present value calculations by discounting? What would be the price of the second investment opportunity, given that the price of this first investment opportunity is 599.92? What would be the price of the second investment opportunity?
Two times larger than the investment opportunity of the first one, 1,199.84.
Exactly, right? It would be 2 times 599.92. And why is that? Because in each of the times considered, the cash flows of the second investment opportunity are exactly twice as big as in the first one. So the price of the second investment opportunity, or the present value of this, would be 2 times 599.92. Feel free to double check, right? Calculate 700 divided by 1.1 plus 500 divided by 1.1 to the power of 2 plus 200 divided by 1.1 to the power of 3. But that's according to the law of one price. You double the cash flows in each of the states, and the present value will also double. More generally, this is here summarized in this formal equation, right? You would have a value of cash flow in T plus cash flow in T plus 1 plus cash flow in T plus 2 would be equal to X. And now if you scale up all these cash flows in the different periods by a factor M, then the value of this scaled cash flow would be M times the original one. So exactly what we applied here, we scaled up everything by 2, all the cash flows by 2, and this results in scaling up the present value also by 2, right? This is just the formal description of this. Now, adding a cash flow example. Suppose we have two cash flows, cash flow A and cash flow B. Cash flow A being characterized here by these highlighted cash flows. So in period 1, 350, in period 2, 250, in period 3, 100. And cash flow B being characterized here by these cash flows. So 100 in period 1, minus 50 in period 2, and 0 in period 3. At a 10% discount rate, which you can also double check by yourself, you could then derive that the present value of cash flow A is 350 divided by 1.1 plus 250 divided by 1.1 to the power of 2 plus 100 divided by 1.1 to the power of 3, which would give you then 599.92, which is exactly the same as in the previous example. And for cash flow B, you can do the same. The present value would be, well, 100 divided by 1.1 minus 50 divided by 1.1 to the power of 2, which would give you a present value of 49.59. Now suppose you have a third cash flow, which is characterized by the cash flow, or a third investment, which is characterized by the cash flow streams, as you can see here. What can you say about this investment opportunity when you compare it to cash to A and B? What can you say about the cash flows when you compare these two with this, these two with this, and these two with this? Exactly. So let's suppose this is cash flow called, I see in the chat, let's suppose this investment opportunity is called C. Then C is equal to A plus B. So 350 plus 100 is equal to 450. 250 minus 50 is 200. 100 plus 0 is 100. So what you can see is that this investment opportunity is nothing else than the exact sum of A and B. And based on the law of one price, without having to calculate the individual present values of the cash flows by saying 540 divided by 1 plus 1, plus 200 divided by 1 plus 1 to the power of 2, plus 100 divided by 1 plus 1 to the power of 3. Without having to calculate this, given that we already know the numerical values of the present value of cash of this investment opportunity A, as well as we know the present value of investment opportunity B, what can we say about the present value of investment opportunity, let's call it C, without having to calculate it in this way I just described a second ago? What is the present value of this investment opportunity, which I call C now?
The present value of C is equal to the present value of A plus the present value of B.
Exactly. It's 599.92, and I also see it in the chat. It's the present value of A, 599.92, plus 49 plus 59. And this is because of the law of one price, because you argue, well, same investments, same price. And in the end, C, so the investment opportunity C is nothing else than the sum of investment opportunity A plus investment opportunity B. So it wouldn't matter if you invested in A and B, or if you invested directly in another investment opportunity C, which mirrors exactly what A and B are about. And therefore, the price of, if you buy A and B, if the law of one price holds, should be exactly the same as if you bought C, which mimics the same payments of, or the same stream of cash flows, right? And this is also summarized here again. So suppose here we have the value of, here you have investment opportunity A with certain cash flows, which is valued at X. Here you have the value of B, here, investment opportunity B, which has certain cash flows, which is Y. And then the time t value of, let's see here, this third, this third investment opportunity, which is the sum of A and B. So here the value of the third one, which is the sum of A and B in the different points in time, is nothing else than the time t value of A plus the time t value of Y, because of the law of one price. So there is no such thing like a free lunch in terms of saying, well, here I found a loophole which allows me to buy this third, or which gives me here a lower price than if I bought here these two other investment opportunities. At least in the long term, in efficient markets, this should not be the case. Which doesn't mean that in reality it might be that, well, for whatever reason, there is a supplier of certain investment opportunities or whatever that does it for a not efficient or not appropriate price, either too cheap or too expensive. But if efficient markets are considered, this should not be observable, right? However, reality might look different sometimes. Well, and now we come to the third point, like delayed cash flows, right? Look here at this first investment opportunity. You see, well, we have in time 0, nothing happening. In time 1, nothing happening. In time 2, we get 350. In time 3, we get 250. In time 4, we get 100. Right? Based on this, if we calculate the time T1 value, so not the present value, but here we're calculating the time T1 value of this investment or this cash flow stream. We would then calculate 350 divided by 1.1 plus 250 divided by 1.1 to the power of 2 plus 100 divided by 1.1 to the power of 3, right? Which would give us again the 599.92. And now, let's suppose we are not interested in the time in a T1 value of this stream, but in the time T0 value of the stream. What would we have to do in order to obtain from these 599.92 the T0 value, meaning the present value of this stream? What would we have to do with all the knowledge we have so far? What would we have to do? Well, 599 are the T1 value of this stream. So what we would have here in T1 would be our 599.92. That's the T1 value of our cash flow stream as described here. What would be the T0 value of the 599.92? Well, I see it already in the chat. It would be nothing else than discounting the 599 another period, so go one step further. And how would we do it? Well, we would divide the 599.92 by 1.1. But the law of one price still holds. It means that, okay, it makes a difference if I have a cash flow, or if I evaluate the cash flow from a T.1 perspective or a T.0 perspective, and that should be accounted for, right? And that would be achieved by simply taking the 599.92, which are the to obtain this value, right? However, might also be a different scenario. Suppose now that we have the 350 not obtained in T equal 2, and the 250 in T equal 3, and the 100 in T equal 4. But suppose that we obtain the 350 in period equal 1, 250 in period equal 2, and 100 in period 3. The time 0 value of this cash flow would again be 599.92. And now let's assume that you obtain these values as specified before one period later, right? Then you would have again to discount them one more period, right? Because the 350 you would not obtain, right? The 350 you would not obtain in T equal 1, but in T equal 2. So you would have to discount the 350 one period more in order to go to the T0 value of the 350. Therefore, you would have to discount it one time more. And the same holds true for the 250, which you would get in this initial example at T equal to 2. Here you would get it at T equal to 3. So the time 0 value of the 250, you would have to discount one period more, and the same you would have to do for the 100, right? And by analogy, the same thing holds when it comes to accelerated cash flows. So suppose initially you would get the stream of cash flow at T equals 0, meaning you would start getting the 350 in t equals 0, the 250 in t equal 1, and the 100 at period t2. The t minus 1 value of this cash flow would again be 599.92. And now suppose that you can accelerate this payment by 1 period, then you would have to also account for this by discounting correspondingly. So the underlying idea here is simply that if the law of one price holds, as described here, meaning you have an initial cash flow, yeah, you have an initial set of cash flows. You see, say the first cash flow is in point t, then the second in t plus 1, then the third in t plus 2, and so forth, which will be then time t value equal to x. If you now assume that this stream of cash flows is delayed by, let's say, s periods, then the time t value of this delayed cash flow needs to be discounted by the corresponding discount factor. And if it's delayed by s periods, the present value of this cash flow is x divided by 1 plus r to the power of s. And by analogy, if your initial stream of cash flows, it can be accelerated, meaning can occur earlier than initially and earlier by u periods, then the time t value of this cash flow, yeah, you can calculate by basically using the interest rate factor, which we discussed in the very beginning of our class. And the interest factor would be 1 plus r to the power of u, where u stands for the number of periods by which you can accelerate your payments. But apart from that, the law of one price indicates that the price only changes in the amount of either accelerated payments. So if you get some things earlier, yeah, that has value for you, but there is no additional value apart from, you know, the accelerated payments. And by analogy, if you get something later or the same product later, then this also decreases the value, the present value or the time t value of this investment by the corresponding discount factor. And this is where the circle somehow closes to what you might recall was one of our very first questions I asked you in the beginning of today's sessions. I mean, suppose you can have 10 euros today versus 10 euros tomorrow, right? And basically the law of one price would say that, okay, given that we have interest rates and so forth, then having this money earlier, yeah, would increase or would make the 10 euros today more attractive as compared to the 10 euros tomorrow, but not because not because 10 is not equal to 10, because you have 10 monetary units today and 10 monetary units tomorrow, but because of the time value of money. And the time value of money means if you have something earlier, then it's more attractive than if you have it later. But the law of one price simply states that if you take this discountings into account and you extend the idea to investment projects, is that if you have two same investment and projects and you can conduct them earlier than later, then, you know, the time t value of this investment is a different one than if you conduct it later, even though it's the same investment opportunity. And the same holds true also in the other direction. What we've summarized here is some follow-up problems on annuities, right? Recall what is particular here is what you might recall from before when we talked about annuities and perpetuities is that, well, in period T, there was no payment and there were like the payments starting in period 1, right? Now, in this example here, for instance, we have, how would you describe this? What kind of, without now reading into the slide too much, you have constant payments over time with a finite horizon. what is this? Is this like a growing annuity? Is this a constant perpetuity? Is it a growing perpetuity? Or if you look here at this stream, what would you say? What is this? This is a
constant annuity.
It's a constant annuity, right? Because we have constant payments over time, over a finite time horizon. But what is different if we now look at this stream as compared to, no, this is constant perpetuity as compared to this stream? What is different?
At period 0, there is cash flow in the later timeline.
Exactly. So that's the difference. So I will go back here in the constant annuity. There was no payment in the time t, whilst here in this example, we have the constant payment in time t. And the law of one price, without now going into the calculations, I think we've done enough today, states that, well, okay, in order to evaluate this cash flow, this goes back to the sum of investment opportunity, or the sum of individual investment opportunities has the same price as if we summed the individual components, right? What we talked about here in the adding cash flow example, right? So basically, if we have one cash flow A and one cash flow B, yeah, and we have another cash flow C, which is the sum of the two, then they should have the same time t value. And here, when we now look at this problem, what can we say? Well, basically, we can separate this into two examples or two cases. We can say from t equal to 1, we could apply our formula for a constant annuity to calculate the time t value. And this other component here, this is like another cash flow we could consider individually. And the present value here, because we start at period 0, so the present value of this cash flow can be calculated by, well, calculating the cash flow of the constant annuity plus the cash flow of this initial constant payment. Yeah, recall what was the formula for our constant annuity. Our constant annuity had this formula. So we could calculate for, yeah, we could use this formula, and I will jump down again. We could jump down to calculate here the present value of this part. Because recall, in the constant annuity case, we had no payment in 0. So we basically assuming that we have 0 plus all these payments until time n. But given that here in this example, well, we simply have a first payment, in order to calculate the present value of the total investment here, or cash flow stream here, we would have to add C as well. So based on the considerations from the law of one price, where we can say, well, the time t value, or in this case, the present value of this stream, of this cash flow stream, is nothing else than the sum of a constant annuity plus the initial cash flow which we receive at the beginning. This we can calculate with the formula of a constant annuity, and we then add the present value of the cash flow received in period 0. Well, and the present value of a cash flow received in period 0 is C. So the result would be apply the formula for the constant annuity plus C. Right? And then there are also other cases, like suppose we have here again a stream of cash flows. Maybe again the question, what is this cash flow stream reflecting? Well, we have again a stream of constant payments over a finite points in time. So what is this? This is A this is again a constant annuity, right? Constant perpetuity. Well, it would be it is not, because you see we have a finite payment in t equal n. So it's not, I read in the chat that this is a constant perpetuity, but you see the last payment here is what is the formula for price of a perpetuity? Okay, here I must say I get where you're coming from, because here on the slide it's written perpetuity, but what you see here on the timeline is you have a finite payment at point n. So if I see, so there's an inconsistency on the slide. Here it should be written either here it should be written annuity, or here it should be written where n equal, or it should be added here where n equals infinity, right? So I get where your point is coming from, and this is because here it should be clearer that either n is infinite or we have a annuity. So this needs to be corrected in follow-up slides. But anyway, the logic, or the most important factor for you to calculate based on this delayed payments of this constant, be it annuity or perpetuity, is that you need to account for the fact that, in contrast to the normal formula which we applied, in which we said, well, we have a time t analysis, in t+1 the payment starts, so the perpetuity value would be c divided by r. If the payment is delayed and it doesn't start at t+1, but it starts at t+5 or t+6, then recall what we said here. If we have a delayed stream of payments, then we would use the formula of a constant perpetuity to calculate the value of this. If we assume they are perpetual payments, we would apply this formula to calculate x. So the time t value of the constant perpetuity would be c divided by r. So we would apply c divided by r. That would be our time t value of our constant perpetuity. However, given that the constant payments do not start at t+1 or t+2 or t+3, but they start, as you can see here, at t+5, we would have to apply this formula and discount our c divided by r. C divided by r would be the value, the time t value of the constant perpetuity, and divide this c divided by r by 1 plus r to the power of s. And here we would have a delayed payment of a few periods, right? Normally we would start at 1. However, now we start 1, 2, 3, 4 periods later, right? Normally in a constant perpetuity case, recall, constant perpetuity, we start paying at t+1. Now we start at t+5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 periods later, right? Good. I would say this was a lot for today. Let me very briefly wrap up. Today's lecture was about financial mathematics. Before we started talking about this lecture today, we had like this background about what corporate finance is about. We talked about what the objective of a firm is. Can anyone recall again what was the main objective of the firm we are going to follow in context of the course of this introductory finance lecture? What was the main objective of a firm again?
The objective is to maximize the value of the firm.
Exactly. So the objective is to maximize the value of the firm. which kind of decisions did the firm have to make again? We had like these three subsections. What were those again?
Investment,
You know?
financing, dividend.
Yeah, exactly. Those were those considerations. Perfect. Well, we derived like all these efficiency considerations and what can go wrong. Yeah, we discussed the shareholder focus, put it into relation to other corporate governance mechanisms, maybe also as a short recap, what alternative corporate governance mechanisms did we discuss yesterday? Do you recall? I mean, which two countries did we discuss yesterday in context of alternative corporate governance mechanisms? Do you recall that? Well, we discussed Germany and Japan. And what do you recall what the particularity about the German alternative corporate governance mechanism was? Germany and Japan, also someone wrote, I've just seen it. Okay, and what was special about Germany? Well, just in a nutshell, there it was a bank-based system, so banks played a more active stake in terms of, contributing to governing firms. Nevertheless, shareholders also played a role. And in Japan, do you recall what was special about Japan? Just a short wrap up before we finish. I just thought it's also important or good idea to make you think a little bit about what we also covered yesterday, not to get you completely lost about all the mathematics we've done today. Do you recall what Japan was about? The corporate governance mechanism in Japan, the particularity? I know it's been a lot today, but just shortly, it was this, they had this kaitsus system, this elitist managerial system in which the managers basically controlled each other from the companies and wanted to ensure that in case one firm is governed in a bad way, that this basically club of experts could contribute to bring the company back on the right track. But do you recall what problem could arise in this kaitsus system, for instance? Managers controlling each other, okay. That's correct. But what could be the problem in this elitist system, so to speak? Well, this system works good as long as, most of the firms are governed in a good way. And the example I brought, I think yesterday, was suppose you have 100 Japanese firms, 99 of them run in a good way, and then one firm run in a bad way, then the 99 could contribute to make the one firm or give advice in terms of making the one firm which is not running that well look better or make better. However, if the picture changes and many firms are run in a bad way, like in a very extreme case, suppose there are 99 bad companies and one company run in a good way, you might run into problems. And the one who might run into problems is not the 99 ones, because they would not listen to the one guy who's giving good advice. Rather, the 99 bad ones might say, there's someone asking all these questions and he's annoying and somehow letting us appear in a bad picture. Maybe we should, to over stylize it, maybe we should not take his advice, but maybe we should get rid of him in terms of, not taking his advice. But and then this whole idea of basically controlling and governing could potentially be endangered, right? Well, we have covered now all this conceptual framework, talked about balance sheets, cash flows, income statements, the primary goal of the firm, which is to maximize the value, talked about investment opportunities, cash flow analysis, evaluations of investment opportunities, talked about different kind of investments or the way cash flows can arise with perpetuities, annuities, constant and growing ones. And what is going to be the next lecture, or what we're going to discuss in our next lecture. Wait a second. What we're going to discuss in our next lecture is risk risks. So let me quickly show you one thing. And maybe in while I am looking at what I want to show you, already the information that Sarah will upload, also the materials and exercises for the second lecture, which we have been discussing today, right? So you will have the chance to take a look at them. But now I just want to give you a heads up with regards to what you can expect in our next sessions. So I'm going to start sharing again my screen, and we will not, don't worry, we will not cover any more topic in detail. Yeah, but we're going to deal with the topic of risk and return. We'll talk about measuring risk, talking about risks and trade-offs, and also talking about asset pricing, right? So when it's about how do we price actually a stock, yeah, so-called capital asset pricing model will become relevant, right? And as you can see, also here we will deal with some formulas, some also formal aspects, right? But all of it is very important to understand in context of a corporate, or in context of an introductory finance course. We'll talk about utilities, utility functions, right? I mean, today we talked about preferences. I prefer to have something today as compared to tomorrow, but maybe also these preferences could be about, well, I do not want to take that much risk. And if I take risk, I want to be rewarded for the risk. We will talk about what is actually risk. Is risk something bad? Is risk something good? Is this something we have to be afraid of? Or is this something which we could also see as an opportunity? Or all these kind of things, which are still open questions yet, which are, however, from a finance perspective, very important. It's important to understand how risk plays a role, and also how we as investors, as potential investors in stocks, want to make educated statements about the evaluation of stocks, right? I mean, so far, at least in terms of what you've learned in context of your studies, well, I guess you have not really discussed about structural ways to evaluate stocks, right? And if a stock is priced in a good way, and with a good way, I mean like in a fair way, or if maybe a stock is overpriced. This again comes back to these efficiency considerations, right? I mean, an efficient market in principle, everything should be priced appropriately. You would argue, well, that's the stock price and that's reflecting efficiency, and therefore that's the right price. In reality, it might look different. I mean, because of informational asymmetries, recall also a thing we discussed yesterday. If information are not distributed into the market in a way they should, well, this can lead to misevaluations, right? I mean, for those, you can Google Wirecard once, and see, this was like a German example of a company which held back very relevant information. Yeah, there was a big hype about this company, and suddenly it turned out that, well, there was a lots of, let's say, things going on which were misleading and also causing the prices not to be appropriate and the like. So all these things we haven't discussed yet. All these things we will discuss or start discussing next week. Also, as a heads up, next week will be a mix of lectures and exercise sessions. So we will do, I think on Friday, you will have a session with Sarah. She will discuss with you selected exercises and which might be organized in a way that she will, it will not be like the lecture, at least that's the current state we agreed in terms of, she will go and lecture all of you in parallel as I do now with you 90 people listening to what I'm saying, but rather she might give like introductory remarks, introductory exercises, and then maybe create some breakout rooms in which people can work together to work on things, and Sarah will then also discuss in each group where potential problems are. And then once you come back together in the group, one can discuss implications, problems together, right? So this is the goal of these exercise sessions, to also make you work on problems, use Sarah's experience and knowledge as an additional support, right? But it's not structured as here in the lecture, at least that's the setup as of now, that she will entertain you 1.5 hours or 2 hours with exercise on her own, but it's going to be a little more interactive. That's our goal, to also make you talk, make you work, and Sarah is going to guide you through this. I'm sure it's going to be a good sessions. So that's Friday. Saturday will be, as far as the current plan is, will be lecture based. And Sunday will, I think, also be lecture and exercise session based. But here we have to see how things are going. But that's the current plan. Now I got a question from the chat regarding the password of so to open the lecture notes. So I see it was already shared here in the chat. So please, all documents should be opened with the same, or it should be possible to open all of the documents with the same password. Apart from that, I would like to thank you for today's attention. I know it's a Sunday. I know for you it's a Sunday evening. Here it's also approaching Sunday afternoon. I hope you will enjoy the remainder of the day. If there is no other question from your end, which I would like to open the room for in a second. We have 1 minute left. So is there anything else to discuss or ask? If so, then please feel free to do so.
May I have a question?
Yeah.
I want to add about the growing rate of perpetuity or annuity. I have no problem with understand the formulas because your explanation is clear. I just want to know that how the growing rate is determined, or we say what factors will influence the growing rate.
In the end, you could argue that it's up to the private law. You could argue, for instance, you can have mortgages that are constructed as annuities, right? In which it's said, okay, you have an initial payment for your mortgage, which amounts to, I don't know, 500 euros per month. And then over time, the repayments will increase by a contractually specified amount. So the bank will say, okay, we start with 500 fix, and then we have a growing rate of, let's say, I don't know, 0.5% or 0.25%, whatever. Well, and then if the mortgage holder accepts this, then that's the agreement. The way this interest rate is found, the bank might have their own models. Also, the other customer might have their own models to estimate this. It's in the end, if it's like, for instance, a mortgage annuity, part of private rebargainings. If it's about like an investment, you invest into a product and you are estimating that the cash flows in the beginning are low, but then they're going to rise exponentially, because if you have the growing rate in the end, the growing pattern will be exponential. Wait, that's in the end, given that it's an outlook to the future, it's not something you can predict for sure, right? It's part of basically your modeling, maybe also your experience of previous product launches, where you say, well, in the beginning, it might take some time to get people to know about the product. And if we see that this product is not only applied by us, but there might also be like complementary effects, meaning, well, if it's, for instance, a technical component first used in, I don't know, mobile phones, but this technical components could be also applied in other computers whatsoever, or your development could be applied to more industries, then you would argue that, okay, we have in the beginning a we need to enter the market, we need to get our product, whatever, into the market, but then once it enters and once we hope that this is going to be applied, it will be applied more and more, which would generate a certain growth pattern. But it's in the end a question of modeling, expectations, bargainings, depending also on the product you're facing with. So there is no easy and quick answer to that, right?
Yeah,
so I hope I could answer this question. Great. Is there any other question you would like to ask now, or if not, I will still wait a second. I already saw some people, or someone said goodbye. I also see first people are leaving. If there are no further questions, which you still can ask, if there should be no further questions from your side, yeah, I see the number of people is decreasing more and more.